We're back.
We're back.
Good to be here this Monday to talk about our next law from the 48 Laws of Power. So this is Law 26, which is keep your hands clean. You must seem a paragon of civility and efficiency. Your hands are never soiled by mistakes and nasty deeds. Maintain such a spotless appearance by using others as scapegoats and cat's paws to disguise your involvement. So Law 26 is keep your hands clean. And I had to look up the word paragon because I didn't know. So for those who don't know, paragon is a model of excellence, someone of exceptional merit.
Wow.
So that's Law 26. Why don't you take it away, and what do you think about this law?
It's interesting law, and it definitely happens today, especially in the corporate structure.
Yeah.
I mean, for many years I worked for a very large insurance company, and I remember a while back, okay, we're talking about probably early 2000s or so, the CEO decided either to buy very little, what do you call the reinsurance, okay? Or I don't think he didn't buy it at all. I think he just bought a lot less because the reinsurance had gone up tremendously compared to previous years. And that particular year, they had a lot of catastrophic losses throughout the United States. And so that bold move that he made backfired on him. Okay, but as the years went by, he stayed as CEO. He didn't get fired for something like that, which he should have, because he really affected the bottom line of the company that I worked for. Yet there were 3 people let go, if I remember correctly, at least 2 in upper management. And as you know, you never get the full story in the sales department.
Right.
We were sales. So you've got, this company was so big that it had, higher management, middle management, lower management, and then things trickled down, okay? But the word on the street was that supposedly he wasn't informed correctly by a couple of the departments, okay, of potentially the risk and reward of not buying so much or so little. And so a couple of heads rolled, and they were department heads. And so I remember living through this, and I remember thinking, you know what? Okay, I didn't know, this book got written in the late 90s, right? You said?
Right.
Right. Well, it was already out, okay? But I didn't know about this particular law. There's no way on earth he would have accepted any mistake or any wrongdoing.
So he basically, the CEO, made an error and
Correct.
ended up firing other people.
I think 3 department heads.
Yeah.
Because you can always turn things around, I mean, you can see a really good lawyer take either the offensive or the defensive,
Oh, yeah.
and really make it sound good. And what ended up happening, I believe that he didn't buy enough reinsurance. The other side of the coin is that had we had that year, a calm year, he would have looked like a hero. But
Right.
we didn't. We had a very hurricanes here, earthquakes, this and that. And we took a huge hit for having so little reinsurance. And it was his fault. The final decision lied with him. And he didn't buy enough reinsurance, and we took a huge hit. The stocks took plummet. Well, it went down. It went quite down. I think, if I remember correctly, 16-20% or something like that, which was huge. But he didn't take responsibility for it. He stayed as CEO for many years thereafter.
Yeah, so by him firing, let's say, these other people, he basically was not taking responsibility. He was keeping his hands clean.
Right.
And I'm sure that happens a lot in corporate settings.
For sure.
It was interesting because as I was reviewing this law again, Robert Greene is sharing that when you're in that position of power, if you're going to use this law, you have to have somebody that you give a lot of responsibility to, and you kind of prop them up, and they're the ones that are getting a lot of the praise at the time, right? But when the time comes, you're going to use them as your scapegoat.
Correct.
You're going to use them to take the fall. And the danger of that I was thinking was that when you prop somebody up, and he does say this, eventually they'll turn on you. They could turn on you because they have enough power. This is for me, it was a very difficult law because...
Well, that happened in China. So, you know, that actually happened in China. Mao Zedong was the communist leader, and the nationalists had cornered him. They made him, you know, I don't remember the details, but in history, I know that Mao Zedong was cornered. He made, what was it, the walk of 1,000 miles or something like that. Anyway, the nationalists had cornered Mao Zedong. Mm-hmm. And then what ended up happening is that the Japanese ended up attacking China. And so now the nationalists and the communists had a common enemy. So instead of crushing Mao Zedong when he could, the nationalists said, Mao Zedong came up with the idea. He was brilliant. And he said, let's fight our common enemy. And so, you know, the leader of the Nationalist Party said, okay, let's do that. But what ended up happening is that Mao Zedong knew all along he had guerrilla tactics where he would come, attack, and then go back into hiding. So the brunt of the deaths and agony and all this was being held by the nationalists who were fighting a more traditional fight. Mm. Once they got rid of Japan, then the civil war began between them again, but now Mao Zedong was not as weak. He had actually gained a lot of power, a lot of following. He had control in many different areas, and he destroyed the nationalists. So, you know, they will turn on you.
Yeah.
And the example in history of Mao Zedong is an exact, like you said.
That the person that you're bringing, basically you're making them eventually become your scapegoat, or you're giving them a lot of power, they turn on you.
Yeah, he had the chance to crush him, and he didn't, because now they had a common enemy, which was Japan.
Right.
And then,
yeah,
by the time they got rid of him, he allowed him to get too strong, too big, too diffused throughout the country. And I mean, the nationalists were squashing him. They could have destroyed him.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
It's interesting. I was trying, and I was thinking, I couldn't think of, you know, how you shared, how you saw it play out in your life. I couldn't think of a situation personally that I had lived in. We shared it in our last podcast where we were doing a review of the last 8 laws, where, right, you know, because you have a lot more experience, you've encountered a lot more of these laws, like in real life. I couldn't think of one.
Well, I'm older than you. I doubled your age, so, you know.
But I couldn't think of a situation where, I'm sure it has happened.
Oh.
It just, I was really trying. But I thought something really interesting, and I liked how he used Cleopatra. Robert Greene uses Cleopatra as an example of keeping your hands clean and have some other people do the dirty work. She used Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, to even take out some of her siblings who had, right? But what I thought was a really powerful quote was, people of power are undone not by the mistakes they make, but how they deal with them. So people of power are undone not by the mistakes that they make, but how they deal with them. And so I don't like this law. I really don't like it. But I acknowledge that this is a real thing. But the person that is using a scapegoat, the person that makes a mistake, that mistake could mean their downfall. And so what he's saying is that, if you handle a mistake and put the blame on someone else, if you, like that one king, there's another example where the king goes to his right hand, it was a commissioner of some sort, and he says, hey, I'm gonna need your head. And the guy says, but I haven't done anything wrong. And he says, I know, but your family will be taken care of. I'm gonna need your head. And the commissioner knew that there was no fighting this, and so he gave in, and he was killed, and then his head was put on a stake. But a lot of the people knew that this was a scapegoat.
The soldiers.
Do you remember what? This was a Chinese army, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was the Han Dynasty.
Okay.
And the leader of the Han Dynasty, let's say the king, he forgot to order food and reserves on time, and so the troops didn't have the troops didn't have enough food, and you gotta feed your soldiers. And so he went to his commissioner and said, I need your head. But like you said, exactly like you said. But some of the people in the higher ranks knew that the guy that was beheaded was not the guilty party. It was actually the king. Okay, he just forgot to order in time because he had too much things going on. The war for the plains, I think that's what they were fighting for, was a lot more strenuous and more difficult than he ever expected it to be. And so, he just miscalculated when the grains would be coming in, and the soldiers started getting hungry. And hungry soldiers will promote a mutiny, And so that's what happened there. And the same, so the high ranking there, it says in the law, they had an idea that it wasn't the commissioner's fault,
Sure.
But the act of beheading him was so brutal that everybody accepted it.
It also instilled fear.
Correct. You don't mess with the king, your head will be on a platter. And then the same thing with the CEO of this major company. I feel that the salespeople, and I'm a salesman, I was in the trenches back then selling. The entire scoop doesn't trickle all the way down. So for the sales, for a few years, we thought he was not to blame. This is stuff that came out later on. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You may be preview to it in the beginning, but only to the very few, the wise that can connect the dots kind of thing. This is a very underhanded law. That's why you don't like it.
I don't. Yeah, I mean.
You make a mistake, and instead of owning up to it, you blame somebody else, and you throw somebody else in the fire.
Yeah, which happens all the time.
All the time.
And you could say, we've all done it. It's like when we were kids, and I had siblings, right? And so you guys would, something happened, and there's the stereotypical, who did that? And you would blame the other one. You would blame the sibling or something, that, or another kid. So we've done it, right? We've all done it. You try to keep your hands clean.
You know what? You just reminded me of something very, very silly. On social media, they have these couple of bulldogs, and they ripped up some sandals and this and that, and the owner is speaking to them very harshly, and he says, "Who did this? Which one of you did this?" And then one of them goes with his paw.
Oh, he blames the other one.
This guy did it.
Yeah.
It's instinctive.
Yeah.
As a child, even in the animal kingdom, because that is funny as okay, who did this? Who did this? And they go, and then all of a sudden one of them gets his paw, and this is not. Funny. This is natural. You can see it in the video.
and that's something that a lot of these underhanded and persuasive, manipulative tactics, as kids we used them. And
Oh.
then what Robert Greene shares, and I've heard many authors and in this line of psychology and human behavior, they say that we unlearn them. We unlearn these behaviors. But as kids, a lot of them, it's kind of survival to get what you want, because you think, I've read that and I've heard that some of the situations for a kid are like existential.
Oh.
So like if you don't get that toy right there, you don't realize you're going to get it later. You can't make that connection. Time, for some reason, isn't, there for the kid yet. They don't understand.
Well, they want it now.
They want it now. They don't understand if they behave, they might get it later.
Right.
So you got to teach them that.
Yeah. No, it's tremendous. In fact, there's a big study out there. They got kids when they were very young. I'm misquoting this all over the place, but the gist of it is like when they're like 5 years old, kids are extremely creative. Okay? Extremely creative. And so they rank up in the genius level, but almost like all of them. And then they end up going to school. And they did the study, I think 3 years after they started school, and the percentage drop is like 16% from
Wow.
genius level. And then they continue to go to school, and they did the study 6 years or another 3 years later, and then the percentage is down like 50%. So there's a school of thought out there, and I'm not pushing this. This is just something that came
There's
up.
a school of thought, no pun intended.
Yeah, there's a school of thought out there that says, as you continue to go to school with the structure and everything that they provide for the children, the creativity of the kids decreases immensely.
Absolutely, I would agree. I mean, unless, and it also depends on the teacher.
It does, and on the school, yeah, on the
Correct.
teacher.
So you could have, like I was sharing with my wife the other day, we were talking about specific subjects that were interesting to us in school, and a lot of it has to do with the teacher. Like if you go back and think, like, what were my favorite subjects back in school?
Probably the teacher had something to
was
do with
good,
it.
or
Yeah.
you have a gravitation to something like the sciences. For some reason, you're attracted to math or economics or certain topics like history.
Right.
My history teacher, I remember in high school, one of them would literally read the chapter, and then he would go to his desk, and all you would do is read the chapter during the classroom.
How boring is that?
There was no teaching, is what I felt. I didn't like that class, and I like history. I wanted to.
Can you imagine if he came in one day dressed as Napoleon, when you would, come in dressed like Napoleon and give the
Yes,
the
yeah.
history on Napoleon, and all the kids would remember it.
Well, there was
Or come in dressed as Cleopatra.
See that you remember? There was this very, very famous leader. We've shared it. Maybe you remember that he was on a stage, and they were asking this person, because he was around in the times of, I believe, Stalin, and they were asking him, "Why didn't you speak up? You knew what he was doing was wrong. Why didn't you speak up?" And this was a very powerful person, a president of some country, leader of some country. And then, but the person yelled it out.
Oh,
In the audience.
There were a lot. Oh, somebody in the audience. Oh, okay.
Someone in the audience that was like, let's say a reporter or something, yelled out, "Why didn't you speak up?" But no one knew who said it. And so this person, this leader, says, "Who just said that?" and called that person out.
Who just said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, who just said that? And it was quiet. And then
Nobody raised their hand.
nobody raised their hand because this person was feared also. And then the person said, "This is why I didn't speak up."
Wow.
Because just as you feel the fear to say to raise
stand
your
up.
hand,
Yeah.
I knew I was gonna get killed if I spoke up against Stalin. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
I don't, but that's tremendous.
Yeah, I want to get that story. I'll link it up in the description. I'll find out. I hope I'm not butchering but it was along those
No, I don't think you're not. And now that you bring up Stalin, it's very interesting. All these are power moves, The 48 Laws of Power is an exceptional book, but they're power moves. So you
Right.
gotta dig in and read each law within its own context.
Yep.
Okay? That's what I think. That's my humble 2 cents. But now that you bring up Stalin, I was reading an article, I think a week ago, and every time that Stalin gave a speech, he would have a standing ovation. And people would clap, and it would go on for minutes, you know? And, you know, people couldn't figure out why. And on this particular document, it said, well, the first person that stopped clapping would usually go to jail.
Jesus.
Imagine that. So he always got a standing ovation, and it lasted for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And if you didn't stand up and if you didn't clap, you went to jail, and potentially you could go to jail for years and years and years. So imagine it. Standing ovation every time, and people would clap for minutes and minutes and minutes and have a smile on their face, because the downside was, if you sit down, you didn't like the speech, and you say, that was a crappy thing.
What a fake environment that
well, he was a
created.
dictator, right? So,
Right.
you know, I mean,
he
killed a bunch of people.
And by the fear that he instilled, he created this environment. Maybe he didn't make that rule up, but people knew they were gonna get jailed or something along the way higher up. It's like, hey, everybody here needs to clap.
Oh yeah, and it was interesting, you know. I mean, think about it. Who would stop clapping first?
So in this law,
you know, it's not funny, but because if you're living in that fear,
no, it was fear.
Yeah,
it was fear.
Same thing with Castro, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom was fearful of saying something too loud or anything like that, and that old saying, you know, the walls have ears.
Mm-hmm.
That carried over when we came to the United States.
Yeah, he ruled by fear.
Oh, and he put a lot of people in jail, and Fidel Castro did, and he killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, you know, we lived it. It's actually, I shouldn't be laughing about that. I kind of feel bad about that.
Well, I mean, the idea that somebody has to, it's,
we cannot imagine in this country, the USA, where we have all these freedoms, and you can get up and talk bad about the president and do all kinds of things that, you know, you and I have discussed about freedom of speech and all this stuff. And so,
well, you know, it's not funny in the sense of like why and the situation, but the situation itself, it's like that somebody, you know, has to resort to that. And you're probably not talking the public. These were like political people of Stalin, right? Like part of his board.
Yeah, the party
and all that.
But there were a bunch of them.
Sure.
You know, hundreds.
But fear. He ruled by fear.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Keeping your hands clean, I do think a lot of, I also thought a lot of like Pontius Pilate, the very famous biblical story of Pontius Pilate washing his hands.
Wow, that's an excellent example, Mike. Yeah.
However, so he was doing that so that he could feel he was keeping his hands clean and that the people chose. But at the end of the day, who's involved in the story? We all think of Pontius Pilate, because the public, there was no scapegoat there, no one to blame it on. But I guess you can say the people. He put it on the people. He said, "All right, it's you guys." So that was an interesting one. But when I was looking up some of these words, because I didn't fully understand, I wanted to look a little more into it. When Robert Greene says you must seem a paragon of civility, paragon we said was like excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the paragon happens to be one of the largest diamonds in the world. It's over 100 carats, and it was.
Is that Indian diamond or something?
It's one of the largest unflawed diamonds in the world. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Wow.
But also when he says maintain such a spotless appearance by using others as scapegoats and cat's paws. So I just kind of looked into the definition like of a scapegoat and a cat paw. Scapegoat, in the Bible, again, biblical, it's a scapegoat is one of a pair of kid goats that is released into the wilderness, taking with it all the sins and impurities, while the other is sacrificed. The concept first appears in the book Leviticus, in which a goat is designated to be cast into the desert to carry away the sins of the community.
Oh, wow.
So the goat was being sent on everyone's behalf to
cleanse themselves because he was taking all the sins with him.
Right.
Very
to be
interesting.
Sacrificed.
Wow.
So that's where the idea of a scapegoat, and then a cat's paw. It was also interesting. It's using people. A cat's paw. A person used by another to do dangerous, distasteful, or unlawful work. And actually, in the 48 Laws of Power, he uses the word dupe. Dupe. Which is basically somebody... the way it's so manipulative, that's why I don't personally like it, but I respect it. But he says, give misinformation to this person here. Let's call him Joe. So that Joe can spread that information to Pablo. You give this dupe, he was using that word, this misinformation.
And now you distance yourself.
Right. Also, never be the bearer of bad news. And that's one of the things he says.
I don't like being the bearer of bad news.
Yeah. Yeah, you always want to keep your hands clean, pristine, and only bring good news. That's in Law 26. So if you're only bearing good news to the people, to your corporation, to your team, to your family, whatever it is, and somebody else does the dirty work, and when there's bad news, Joe is the one who is going to disseminate that information.
Well, what I do, just as an aside real quick, in our real estate business, there's always something going array. There's always something that somehow, I don't know how the real estate business, there's always something happening. Seldom you get into a transaction that goes 100% smoothly.
Yeah.
There's curveballs all over the place.
You're dealing with people, and
Yeah.
anytime you're dealing with people, you're
Right.
going to have that.
But what I do is when we get thrown a curveball, we try to go to the source to resolve it,
Right.
as opposed to going to, let's say if we represent the buyer or the investor. I try to resolve things immediately with the contacts that I have before I come bearing bad news.
Right.
I only deliver bad news when it's just impossible to
Yeah, you
to
try
resolve
to
on our own, and we need either the buyer to get involved or whatever, because they need a signature or something of this nature,
Sure.
But I find that a lot of the times you can resolve a lot of the things that come your way,
Sure.
and you don't necessarily have to deliver this bad news because you take care of it.
But sometimes
You
you do
can't.
have to. There's
Right.
no way out. This
There's
is
no way
something
out.
you can't resolve, and you have to share the information. And I've noticed you hit them with it. You don't hide from delivering the bad news, which I think it's a good trait because, I'm conflicted with this law because I think if you make a mistake, own up to it.
That's what I always say, but
So,
this law doesn't say that.
well, he's talking about moving up in a power
Political moves.
structure. Correct. Political moves. But as a person, I think it's important to, if you make a mistake, we own up to it. You may lose out because, hey, you made a mistake. You can't be trusted on that. That's one option. Or the other one is the person might say, hey, you know what? Pablo made a mistake, but he owned up to it, fixed it right away. Let's move on. I'm okay. And you know what? At least he comes to me when something goes wrong.
Right.
And I think that you got to figure out, I mean, for those listening and trying to work with these laws, you have to figure out, what do you want to actually live by? Because if you're constantly putting blame on other people, you could smell it when somebody is just trying to shift the blame.
Oh, you think? Of course. You
Yeah.
think the public doesn't know? You know,
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson himself says, hey, we don't give the public enough credit.
Yeah.
You know, you think, sometimes the people in power or whatever, they think, oh, the general walk of the mill type of person
Right.
doesn't have are you kidding? They can smell it.
Sure.
And especially in today's day and age where, it's gotten so tough to make a buck and hardships are out there. We have a lot of people in the United States going through hardships.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just in third world countries. We have a lot of issues here.
All over the world.
All over the world.
Including here.
Including here, yeah. And so, Jordan Peterson says, you think they don't smell it? And I remember taking a sales class a long time ago, and the guy was exceptional, the teacher. And he says, look, come clean with your buyer, because sooner or later they're going to realize, make it
Yeah. I agree.
as transparent as possible, because sooner or later they're going to find out if you duped them, like they say, right, in this law. They're going to find out. They're not done,
No. And
Treat them with respect as an equal.
right. But we're talking.
You may know a little bit more about the subject, but eventually they'll find out.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, we're talking like how you wanna try to live your life and what you try to teach your kids and grandkids,
Well,
etc. But like Robert Greene in this law uses, like we talked about Cleopatra as an example of somebody that her main goal was to restore Egypt back to its heyday, let's say, right? At any cost.
Right. So the end justifies the means.
Right. And at any cost meant, well, they would marry their siblings to keep, right, the power within the same family. Even one of the marriages to a sibling that was, I don't know how many years younger, 8 years younger. He was 11, she was at 18, 19, something along that.
Right.
He mysteriously gets poisoned
Yes.
and dies.
A couple of years later.
Couple years later, she realizes at the time the power that one of her sisters had.
Well, she was exiled.
She was exiled from Egypt, and she realizes the power that one of her sister has, and she realizes that Julius Caesar, right, wants to invade and take over Egypt, and she rolls herself up in a
Carpet.
and then
And gets delivered to him.
Gets delivered to him, and seduces him,
Right.
and then Caesar goes after his sister.
Right.
I'm sorry, her Cleopatra's sister.
Right.
Right, and you guys can look into all the names and everything, but that's the gist of it. I mean, she against her own sister, because the sister had more power, so she came back from exile, right? And she eventually got what she wanted.
Oh.
And then when she realized that Caesar was no
Going
longer
down, yeah.
going down,
Well, he got killed.
she associates with
Mark
he got
Antony.
killed. She
Mark
associates
Antony.
with Mark Antony, and does the same thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, isn't Law 5 protect your reputation at all costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say that this Law 26, right, contradicts Law 5? Because, or protect your reputation. When I think of that, I'm thinking, okay, you protect a good reputation, or you protect a bad reputation.
Well, she what?
It plays on you. You know, that's why certain degrees of these laws like overlap and they
Yes.
out. What do you call it? Yeah, they.
Yes. So much depends on your reputation guarded with your life.
That's Law 5, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
But you could say that she was using Law 5 to a certain extent because she did not kill her sister directly. She used war. It was a battle to kill her sister because her father was killed by her sister.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, Ptolemy 12.
Her father was it killed or taken over
No,
by her sister.
I think he was sent to exile.
Yeah, I don't think he was killed. I'm sorry.
And he came back.
And he came back. So, but her sister was the one that
Did it.
took over her father because she wanted to be ruler, and she realized that it was short-lived because of the way she did it. It reminds me of like in the mafia. You were never supposed to. There was the Cosa Nostra, one of their rules, their laws, that you could never kill a made man or a boss. Like it was specifically the boss. You could never kill the boss. You got to power once the boss died, was too old, whatever the case.
He gave it out.
Correct.
To the next of whatever.
And, you know, I've listened to a lot of these guys. John Gotti was one of the first that killed his boss to get and did like a coup. But that was not something that you were supposed to do. You were supposed to respect. But what happened was that Paul Castellano was losing respect because he was a money guy, and you know he was, I guess, kind of recluse.
Well, he passed up a couple people, and I think he made his son in charge of a district or something like that that John Gotti felt belonged to him. So John Gotti felt overpassed. And
John Gotti was actually on the streets. He was doing some things, and this other guy wasn't.
Yeah, he was a warrior.
Yeah. So John Gotti ends up killing him.
That's right. Just like, you know, the generals. The generals back in the Roman times, if they got to, you know, they went and they fought, they come back and the Senate is there, but the generals control the army. So there's this balanced play of power.
Right.
It's amazing. I mean, guys and ladies, it's wonderful and beautiful to read it because you can see the balance of power. If I do this,
right,
the consequences of this are going to take me here. But if I don't do it and I do this, then the consequences of this are going to take me here. Well, and you just have to be very, you are manipulative, and you have to have, you know, like extrasensory perception.
It's a game. But going back to John Gotti, by him doing that and killing his boss, it set a precedence that, oh, we can do that. No longer was that position respected. And going back to Cleopatra, her sister kicked her father out of power, but it was very short-lived, and the father came back, right? So it was the wrong way to get power is what Cleopatra was, I guess, figuring out. So she said, I'm better off getting power instead of killing my sister and taking over. Let me use Julius Caesar, right? Let me use and you know, send her off to exile or whatever the case. So it was a different way of getting the power.
Yeah, well,
and it wasn't short-lived.
Right. And this law, one thing that I learned that I thought was interesting while I was reading it is that the scapegoat could potentially be an innocent person,
right,
that didn't do anything wrong. But also the scapegoat could be the one that was being utilized to do the dirty work. And in the eyes of the masses, they would see, oh, okay, well, he did do it, so it's good, it's all right to get rid of him. But throughout history, that's not necessarily the case. They've used people that were totally innocent about something. Yeah. Like, for example, the conciliar, in the Han Dynasty, when he says, hey, I made the mistake, but I need your head. And the guy said, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And he says, I know, but your family will be well taken care of. But I need your head on a platter. And so in that case, that wasn't his fault.
Right.
But he was the scapegoat. In the other cases, you know, the scapegoat was actually guilty. And guilty because the person in power told them,
they were being used.
Yeah, so be careful because you can be the scapegoat whether you're actually doing the deed or not. Okay? And that happens a lot, I think, in a corporate struggle. I know it happens in Hollywood. I know it does because Robert Greene talks about it, where they destroyed a young man's career by assigning this particular project that they knew from the beginning it was going to fail. They knew from the beginning it was going to fail, but they assigned it to this young man that had a promising career, and they destroyed his career, thereby eliminating the competition. And I wish I could remember the name, but I remember reading that several times because I thought, wow, what a Machiavellian way to run the show.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't there another way?
Well,
I mean, you gotta destroy somebody.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, you know, this law is underhanded.
A lot of this
As
stuff.
a-
A lot of this stuff goes. You don't know. Maybe you're doing that so that you can move higher up yourself. Like, we know of a situation where somebody was told on by an anonymous person that they don't know, which led to them being fired. And why would somebody ruin somebody's life like that?
That is correct.
Because by telling on them, it
Yeah,
led
we
to
just
this
found out
person's
about
life
this young
being
man.
fired. Yeah. So why would somebody do that? Were they gunning for that position? Was it done to be in good graces? Like, why do you do things like that? But they occur. And
You know what? That's an excellent point you bring out, because that just happened. We just became preview to this information like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And what happened is that it was a common chat,
I don't know all the
and
details.
they put something in the chat, and somebody took a screenshot of it, and
Yeah, they turned him in.
they sent it to corporate. Corporate comes back, and
It's horrible.
it is, because God, and yeah, this young man.
Yeah.
Well, but look, things are happening nowadays. That's an excellent example that you just brought up. I actually forgotten about that, or not forgotten, but it's I didn't relate it to this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, people, you're saying, is there another way? There is, but these things occur, and so you want to be aware. You might be being used as a scapegoat. You might be being used as the bearer of bad news and information, and be careful in those situations. How do you protect yourself? Have another avenue. If something happens, you get fired. Have another avenue, because these things do exist.
Yeah.
So.
Because you can say something, and it totally be construed. See, you don't know what people are going through. You just don't.
Yeah.
There was a thing on social media. I mean, I don't know if we're too long on it, but they're showing a bus, and there's this lady that she's like 9 months pregnant. She's about to have a baby, and they're standing up, and there's this young man, seems to be very, very strong, and everybody in the bus says, "Hey, get up, man, give her the seat, get up, give her the seat." And then he says, "Okay." He, in the process of getting up, they find out that he's on crutches. He's missing a leg, and he struggles to get up. He's in pain, so he's also, I don't know what's going on, but then everybody feels horrible, because you're looking at him, he looks strong and everything, and you see the struggle of him coming up and giving the lady the seat, and so everybody feeling bad afterwards, everybody judging first, and everybody feeling bad afterwards.
Sure. You just don't know, like
and
you said.
we all do that.
Sure.
Jordan Peterson says, don't think that you're any different. Don't think that if you were in that bus, you wouldn't judge the kid. You would, just like everybody else, because it's human nature. And then when you realize, then you feel. So this is a very underhanded law, but I guarantee you, like what you just pointed out, it's happening. And it has happened, and it will continue to happen, because they're power moves. People want the power, sometimes even more than the money.
Well, that's what Tony Montana was after.
And for
First
those
you
that
get the
don't
money,
know,
then you get the power.
then you get the women.
Quotes from Scarface.
That's Scarface for those of you that.
Tony Montana. Cool. Well, I think this was a really good law to go over. Is there anything else you want to throw in before we wrap it up?
No, this was good.
Law 26. Cool. Thank you.
All right.